Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well. We've got a fantastic show on the way. But first, I just want to say thanks to NORD VPN, our sponsors here at the Everything is Black and White podcast, who without none of this would be possible. And we've teamed up with them to offer our listeners and viewers an exclusive offer. You can click the link in the podcast description box or go to nordvpn.com/tune to sign up and save your pennies on a plan. It is well worth your time to sign up. You are secure, you are safe, and you're supporting the podcast. Why sign up? I hear you ask. Well, there are a host of benefits. For me, it is the value for money because one subscription can be used across 10 devices. That's your work phone, your personal phone, your tablet, what have you. 10 devices, one subscription. I mean, that is the definition of value for money. The other thing I love about it as well is the way that it keeps your details safe and secure when browsing on public Wi-Fi. So if you're on the bus, the train, you're in a cafe and you're connected to their Wi-Fi, there is always the risk that your details could be compromised. That's your bank details, your passwords, and a load of other stuff as well. But with Nord, you are safe and you are secure. And that for me means a heck of a lot. And look, if you're going abroad as well and you're missing your home comforts and you want to keep with it with all your UK streaming services, then you can click the location back to the UK and make sure you never miss your favorite program. What is not to love about it? It's absolutely fantastic. Very simple to get on board. You download the app, you sign up, and away you go. You're keeping yourself safe, you're keeping yourself secure, and you're supporting the podcast at the same time. And another benefit, and I've already mentioned three, and there are a host of other things to mention as well if we had the time. But the final thing I'm going to mention is there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So it's literally no risk. If you don't like it, get your money back. But you will like it because it's a superb app to have on your phone. Keeps you safe, keeps you secure. And once again, you're supporting the podcast. So click the link or go to nordvpn.com/tune to take advantage of an exclusive offer for our listeners and viewers of the Everything is Black and White podcast. Roll the titles. Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I am Andrew Musgrove, joined by John Gibson. We are back again. If you tuned in to Wednesday's episode, I can only apologize. There was an internet outage, which I didn't realize at the time. I had no warning of, and I thought the episode was brilliant to use. I mean, the content, John, was superb. I know that for certain, but I know that there was a large segment of it that was jumping about and it couldn't be watched, couldn't be listened to. So we've taken it down. We're going to come today with a new show, new questions, probably, hopefully, the same passion that you are used to with me and John. So I can only apologize, but we'll get on with today's show. John, how are you keeping you well?
Well, despite all the things that are happening around our head at our beloved club, and not to mention the yesterday's podcast, my head's still above water. But over about 50 years of covering Newcastle, I've got used to just keeping my head above water. So all is good, Andrew.
Good to hear. There's a lot to talk about. And over the last 24 hours, there has been a development in the move for Yoane Wissa. Newcastle went back to Brentford yesterday and put in a bid of an initial £35 million and then £5 million in add-ons, so a £40 million package overall. Brentford have rejected that. John, what happens next? Where did Newcastle United go to?
I mean, this Wissa thing's becoming a mini Isak, isn't it? The same sort of background player, determined to force himself out of a club, and the club that's selling being stubborn. It has all the look of Isak about it, only we are on the different side of the coin on this one. I think Newcastle must and will stick with it for the moment because they're running out of time. And if Wissa goes off the menu, then there's two strikers and they've got no idea who the two will be. And they're getting well down the list of priorities. I mean, we're on about fifth choice now. So I think, and knowing that the player's passionate to join us, when other players have proved they haven't been passionate to join us because they've opted for the alternative transfer, I think Newcastle will stick with it and hope that what happened with Mourinho in Manchester United will happen with Newcastle. If you remember Brentford on that transfer with Manchester United, dragged out negotiations, changed the asking price time and time again. The player was getting furious. Manchester United stated publicly that they were upset at the way Brentford were doing the deal, but it eventually got over the line. And I think Newcastle will go down that same route for the moment anyway. Because half the job's done, i.e. the player. They know he wants to come. They know he's desperate to come. They know that the terms are acceptable. So if the player was a bit iffy, you would think, oh dear me, maybe when we get to him after all this, he won't want to join us. What I've found not amusing, but ironic as a postscript to the fact that our £40 million thing was rejected was not a statement coming out of Brentford, but a leak coming out of Brentford that they would prefer actually to sell him to Spurs because of the relationship they have with their old manager, Frank, who's gone to Spurs. And there was talk that you will know about, Andrew, that if Spurs took Eze, they would try to put Richarlison in the deal as a swap, which would free up a position for Wissa at Spurs. Of course, all that's gone belly up because Spurs have been gazumped by Arsenal. Don't we know all about that with our first choice centre forwards? But Arsenal have nicked in and are taking Eze instead of Spurs, which means that Spurs deal with Richarlison and Wissa is back on the back burner temporarily. But it's what we faced all summer, and I thought, here we go again. I mean, it is getting silly, but that looks temporary off the table. But stubborn Brentford still stand between us and what we need to do.
At least it's not Sunderland gazumping Newcastle. I mean, to be gazumped is painful enough, but by your local rivals is even more hurtful, isn't it? But yes, thankfully,
yes. For Spurs fans, Arsenal doing that is absolutely horrendous. For me, not much better. But as we've said many times, Eze deserves his transfer, and he's gone about it in absolutely the right way, unlike somebody we know much closer to home. But there we are.
Yeah, we'll get on to Alexander Isak in a wee moment. And what does your gut instinct tell you, John? Will Wissa become a Newcastle United player?
Your gut instinct says yes, because he wants to so much. And I don't think he's as much a priority to Brentford in the way they play, etc., as Isak is to Newcastle. I think Isak would be a bigger loss to Newcastle, which is why they're digging their toes in, and probably we won't be moved unless we get a very good replacement. I don't think and Brentford are more of a selling club. They're used, with utmost respect to Brentford, who have done sensationally in the Premier League, given their base core, but they are used, as Crystal Palace are, to losing players, as Brighton are, and still bouncing back and doing well. And with Ivan Toney, etc., etc. So I think it's less of a shock to the system than Isak is to us. So I think it could well happen, but it might go right to the deadline. And quite frankly, we need a centre forward as quick as possible. Double quick.
I agree with you. I still think this deal happens, but I think it happens very close to deadline day, which isn't ideal for Newcastle United. Others at this point in time say, well, 40 million is about as much as Newcastle should be paying for a 29-year-old who has 1 year left on his deal. Yes, there's an option there to extend for another year. He's going to be missing through AFCON as well towards the end of 2025. Newcastle United should walk away, but time is not on their side. They obviously have scouted Wissa and like what he's about. And the reality of the situation is, John, there are not many options about. Who would be next?
I was going to say, you say walk away, and I can understand that. We are proud, Geordies. We're proud, and we feel that if a player doesn't want us, like Isak, well, off you go. We don't want you. And if Brentford don't want us, or they're going to take our eyes out, right, we're not going to be done by you. We're off. But we have missed out on so many strikers. Can we afford to miss out on another? Bear in mind that the signing of Wissa won't mean the release of Isak. He replaces Callum Wilson. And if we don't, I mean, we could take the moral high ground over Wissa on two accounts and walk away. You could walk away because Brentford want more than he's worth, or you could walk away and say, we don't like the way he's gone about his business, like Isak's gone about his business. Morally, we don't want somebody in our club who will go on strike, etc., etc., etc. So you could walk away on two accounts. The bottom line is, if we do that, September the 1st, we wake up and we've got a Sula and a false nine, and that's it. Can we afford that? And therefore, there is a case to say that if we want a breakthrough on strikers, whether it's Wissa or it's the number one striker to replace Isak, we may have to pay over the odds to get him. That is the life of football. You don't always get bargains. You can't look for bargains all the time. Sometimes you've got to bite the bullet and say, do we want him or do we not? And if it's another 10 million, you'd pay the money, because the alternative is that if you have nobody, the money you lose in the Champions League by going out the first time it's possible, by going out in the FA Cup or the League Cup, by not qualifying for Europe next season, is a lot more than the £10 million extra that you've put on the transfer fee. So you can actually, through being morally correct or saying we aren't going to be taken for a ride, you can make a rod for your own back where you lose that much more money. There's sometimes, and I'm not meaning necessarily Wissa, I think it applies to your number one striker you're going for as well. As sometimes you've got to sit down and say, if this guy ticks all the boxes and we have got to pay 5 million more than we think he's worth maximum, do we do it or do we not? And there's a case for thinking under our circumstances, we may have to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting, John, to see how all this plays out. But just on the topic of replacements, I mean, the same names keep getting mentioned, but even some of those I think are really unrealistic. So you've got Ollie Watkins, who I do like, but that's not going to happen. Strand Larson, who I'm a big fan of, but Wolves are not going to sell, having just made that deal permanent. And Nicholas Jackson, who I think is probably the most likely man to arrive at Newcastle United, but he's been talked up as a Alexander Isak replacement. But again, the price, the wage, and the fact that he will be playing in AFCON as well maybe makes that one even a little bit less likely. Just the fact, though, that we sit here and we struggle to talk about who's next for Yoane Wissa is a big indication to why Newcastle United are willing to gamble on Alexander Isak stopping at the club post September the 1st and then being reintegrated into the squad. Simply, the striker market is non-existent, and the options who are there and are going to cost you a heck of a lot of money.
And are nowhere near your first choice, Andrew. You know, we're now looking, I'm talking about the number one striker, not necessarily the Wissa Callum Wilson situation, the number one striker in the club. You're now looking at about the fifth choice. You know, so you're running, and that worries me. How good, we know the guy is not going to be anywhere near as good as Isak, whoever it is now. But if we've got Eki Tiki, I think the lad that's gone to Liverpool, and we'll see how good he is on Monday night. But I think he is quality. He is a Rolls Royce. He's smooth as silk. He's lovely on the eye. He scores a pile of goals, etc., etc. He is like Isak, and the nearest thing perhaps to Isak. But we haven't got him. We haven't got Senso. We haven't got Delap. We haven't got João Pedro. So the guy we're now looking at is fifth or sixth choice. Now, if the fifth or sixth choice to Newcastle United's hierarchy, then are they good enough for the job we want to do. I mean, Ollie Watkins, for example, won't go for Watkins and Wissa because they're 28 and 29, and they see no market value in them. They see no long-term situation in them because of the age structure. They'll take one guy in that sort of age group, but the other guy's got to be that much younger. So as long as you take Wissa, you're not going to get Watkins or Vicky Verky. And I'm underwhelmed by the idea of Nicholas Jackson. He doesn't appeal. The Wolves guy, I know you absolutely love, and I can understand why, but I don't think Wolves want him to go. We're in another situation of reluctant sellers. I mean, we're running out of options. And what's going to end up with is the last option is going to be Isak. And he better get used to that, man.
Yeah, indeed. And what a chaotic mess this saga has turned into. And on the talk of options and how far down the list they are, part of me does wonder, though, whether you would take one of those options who obviously is a lesser player than Alexander Isak, but really wants to play for Newcastle United. And yes, they may not have been top of the list, but here we are, and they are what is at the table. And would you take a player who is maybe 2 levels beneath Isak, but has that desire, that want, that commitment to play for Newcastle United? Or would you rather gamble on Alexander Isak coming back into the fold come October or November?
It's the $1 million question, isn't it? And it's one of the reasons, Andrew, why I think they won't walk away from Wissa because of Brentford and perhaps having to pay over the odds, because they know he is passionate about playing for Newcastle. And that's 3/4 of the battle. And it's becoming more so by the day now, isn't it? Please let us have somebody that actually wants to be here. And this guy wants to be here. And that is so important. You're absolutely right. And my great concern with Isak, and every morning we wake up, we're closer to Isak staying at Newcastle United because we're nearer the end of the transfer deadline. And Isak is threatened. He's gone on strike. He refused to play at Celtic. He refused to go to Far East. He refused to play at Aston Villa. He's refused to play against Liverpool. So he is on strike. And he said that he'll never play for Newcastle again. Now, I don't believe come September the 2nd, when he wakes up in the morning and he's not at Liverpool, that he can afford to say that he'll never play again for Newcastle, because he'd have to go all the way to January and possibly to next summer, full season, on strike, not playing at all in World Cup year, at a time where Newcastle won't pay his wages because they can fine him a fortnight's wages every game he misses. So he will not get paid at all because he will be in breach of contract. So they are right that if he still doesn't play, they don't pay. So can he stand all that? That's the gamble he faces. He may feel he's in control of things now and he can jerk Newcastle strings and he can make public statements for the first time and ruffle feathers and etc., etc. But come September the 2nd, he cannot do that. But my fear is not that if he's still with us on September the 2nd, my fear is not that he'll go on strike and never play for us. My fear is he won't go on strike because he can't legally go on strike, because he'll need to train every day and he'll need to play, or his market value. How many clubs are going to want him in a year's time if he's never kicked a football? Will Liverpool want him and want to pay the money they're paying? Will Arsenal want him if the centre forward they bought's as bad as he's looked in his first game? And will Real Madrid or Barcelona want him? No, they won't. So he won't afford to do that. My concern, Andrew, is that he comes back into the fold reluctantly and starts training with us again and playing on match day, but he just ambles about. He doesn't put 110% in. And that makes it difficult for Newcastle because you can't prove he's not putting 100% in. You've got to stick with him. You've got to pay him. And he's ambling about. That is the worst case scenario for me. It's not him being on strike the whole time, but it is him playing centre forward for Newcastle with about as much enthusiasm and movement as Gray's Monument.
Yeah, spot on. And that is my biggest concern about this gamble from Newcastle United. I understand why they're doing it. Of course, they don't want to sell without a replacement, and then they also need to be seen to be strong in this situation, and more on that in a brief moment. But in terms of keeping the door open for him to return, the concern is whether you can ever trust him again to put 100% commitment into Newcastle United, into wearing the black and white shirt. And for me, I don't think you can. I really don't think you can, because the bridges have been burnt. You look back at how he was towards the end of last season, you may think that actually his desire and want to lead had something to do with his poor performances. And to have him back in such a big season, Champions League, they'll want to go far in the domestic cups, and obviously make a play for the top four again. To roll the dice that Alexander Isak comes back and is focused and is fit mentally, physically, I think it's a huge one. But Newcastle, John, are in such a tough position because, as we've said, the replacement isn't there. Secondly, the bid worthy of his value hasn't come in either. So it's not like Newcastle United are digging their heels in terms of all the conditions have been met, because in the statement that they put out, they were correct. The conditions of a sale are not there for Newcastle United, and they've got to put themselves first. But I don't trust him. I really don't trust him to put his all in for Newcastle United come October.
Well, I thought his body language towards the end of last season was very questionable. I thought, forget Wembley, that's a different game and it's a drama and you win a medal and etc. etc. I thought Isak scored goals, but he missed a load towards the end of last season. And I remember saying, possibly to yourself, definitely to Malcolm McDonald, I don't know if it's me, but this guy doesn't look right. He doesn't look as if he's putting it in. He looks as if he's been tapped. Let's be truthful. He looked that way. I don't know if it's true or not, but his body language told me that. And there was no indication at that time of anything happening. And of course, Arsenal wanted him at that time as much as Liverpool wanted him. And I was very concerned about his body language towards the end of last season. Of course, the trouble is that when your owners live as far away as the Saudi owners do, you view things from a distance. You don't see them on the ground 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think Newcastle were very complacent when the problem first arose. They thought, he's on a 3-year contract still remaining. We can see this out. Why should we give him a new contract? Let's sit still and it'll all pan out. The comfort blanket was the 3-year deal. The comfort blanket was pulled away by Isak, and it was a bed of nails beneath it. And that's Newcastle were too complacent there. I think Newcastle's hierarchy now will go down the road of, well, we've got a miracle worker in Eddie Howe. You look at Eddie Howe. Now, if Isak stays, Eddie will get him on side again. He got Anthony Gordon on side again when he wanted to go to Liverpool, and his body language was terrible. And all of us, mind, it took him about 6 months to get Gordon back on side. But you can see the hierarchy saying, this is what I suspect. Look at the miracle he did with Gordon, get him on side. Look at the miracle he did to make a very poor centre forward, Joe Linton, into a Brazilian international midfielder. Look at what he did with Gordon, a very average player at Everton who become an England international. Look what he did for Dan Burn, one pace centre half who is now a local hero and is playing for England. You look what he did for Toney after 6 months out banned. He got him on side. Everybody thought Toney would go back to Italy. He didn't. He become on side here and has become an absolute gem. And they'll be looking for another miracle with Isak. Can he do another miracle? He's done all the miracles I've talked about. Maybe he can, but it's asking an awful lot, isn't it?
It certainly is. But you do back Eddie Howe to turn this around. But it also requires buy-in from Alexander Isak. It'll require an apology, a realization that he was wrong in the way things have come about. I think we look at his statement, John, and it was clearly one final act of desperation to force Newcastle United's hand into selling them. Talk of broken promises, which you've kind of alluded to there, and that is we assume to do with the contract that Amanda Staveley reportedly promised him, and Paul Mitchell again reportedly rejected any chance of that happening. For what it's worth, my opinion, I think Paul Mitchell was absolutely spot on to do that, because I think it would have opened up a huge can of worms for Newcastle United. You've got the PSR headache. I think that would have hurt a lot more had he given Alexander Isak a huge pay rise, and then you would have had other stars like Bruno and Toney and Gordon and Joelinton perhaps knocking on the door and saying, we were a huge part of the success that this team's had as well, just as much as Alexander Isak. So why aren't we being rewarded by a 40% pay rise or whatever it would transpire to be? So I think looking at everything, it was a sensible decision by Paul Mitchell to do that. In an ideal world, Newcastle want to be paying these big wages, but they just cannot do so at the moment. And I actually think the long-term impact of giving Isak that contract would have been more detrimental than losing him this summer, because I think you would have had to sell one of your big stars, and then you would have had 3 or 4 other big names unhappy because they've not been given a pay rise. It is a mess. It goes back to PSR, but these are the decisions that Newcastle have to make within the rules. What did you make of his statement, John?
I think he's dug himself a bigger hole than already been made. First and foremost, at the end of the statement from him and the statement from Newcastle United, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is absolutely nothing has changed. The situation is exactly the way it was before the statement was made. There's only one thing changed, and that was if there's any romantics out there or there's any naive fans out there that said, well, maybe Isak doesn't want to go, isn't being as nasty. We haven't heard from him. It's all the press talking. It's all this, it's all that. Maybe he doesn't. How on earth they could think that when he refused to play against Celtic, refused to go to the Far East, wasn't in the team that played at Aston Villa, won't be in the team for Liverpool. I don't know how they could think that. But the last remnants of that was blown away by his statement, which did say, yes, I am sulking, and yes, I won't play because I've been badly done to, and it's best for us all if I leave. He has shown his colours, and in the vagueness of saying, oh, well, the club broken promises, well, precisely what promises, who made them, and when? Because Newcastle United immediately come out quite naturally and said, nobody at this club, any official at this club promised Isak that he could go this summer. So whose word do we take? Isak's or Newcastle United's? It's what happens in football. Football is a dirty business. It's a cutthroat business. It's a tough business. Promises aren't worth the paper they're not written on because they don't hold up. So, it is a dirty business. But what he's done, he's made it even worse for himself. He is getting less sympathy now. And I tell you what, the rest of the country now, other clubs, and I suppose their fans, will be thinking, the talent Isak's got is fabulous. It is unchallenged. It is 100%. But would we trust him? Would we trust him to come to our club? And if I was Liverpool fan or Liverpool Arnie Slot or the board, I would be thinking, if this guy signs for us with the fuss he's caused at Newcastle United, in 2 years' time when Real Madrid or Barcelona come knocking at his door, will he do the same to us? How much do you trust him? You used the word trust before when we were talking about him staying, and could you trust him on the field to give it 100%? Could a club trust him that he won't do this again? Now, you could say that applies to Wissa, but I don't think it does, because Wissa is 29 very, very shortly. This is the ceiling move for him. This is the big, big move from Brentford to Newcastle. Champions League, capable of winning trophies, as they proved last season, etc., etc. He's not going to get a bigger club in 2 years' time. He'll be 31. He's not going to get a bigger club than Newcastle. He's not going to get Liverpool knocking at his door or one of the continental clubs. So he would not be in a position to do it to Newcastle. Isak's only 24, 25. He's in a position in 2 years' time to do it to Liverpool if the right club comes in, say Barcelona or Real Madrid. Can you trust him anymore? That is what he's damaged his reputation to such an extent and done it so publicly and so drastically that he will pick up the consequences sooner or later.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think Liverpool fans, if they do stumble across this, will share those reservations. But a bit like Wissa, as you've mentioned, it is different because there are different stages of their career and different circumstances. But, you know, do we just have to kind of, and Liverpool fans as well may feel this way, you go, yeah, look, they've not behaved correctly, they've behaved pretty poorly. But at the end of the day, you know, football is a fickle game, John. If they put on the shirt of whatever club they be playing for and score a boatload of goals, then kicking up a fuss will soon be forgotten about, won't it?
Well, you know, they say double standards in one thing and another. But if we lose Isak to Liverpool because he's kicked up a fuss and gone on strike, and we don't take Wissa because he kicked up a fuss and gone on strike, that's a double whammy, isn't it? Can we afford to do that? I mean, we are saying if we keep Isak, will he give us 100% every single game for the whole of this season? I'll tell you one thing, we're not questioning that about Wissa because he's desperate to come here. He'll give us 100%. So do we not want him in the state we're in at the moment? I suggest we need him.
You can say that again. But yeah, you know, Isak's statement, it was just, as I said, a poor attempt to force Newcastle into a corner. And I think he was hoping it would force a U-turn, really. It seemed, John, looking at it again, maybe an act of kind of provocation, really. I think, was he hoping that Newcastle would respond in the extreme and firmly shut the door on any potential return? Now, thankfully, the club responded in a diplomatic way, which was kind of straight out of the playbook of Eddie Howe. You know, it was firm, wasn't insulting, and it wasn't in a manner that shuts the door on that potential return.
They responded brilliantly, yeah. Andrew. Responded brilliantly because I mean, from his point of view, they said in effect, he is part of the family. He's part of the band of brothers, and we will welcome him back when he's good and ready to come back. Oh, put that in your pipe and smoke it. That means you're going nowhere, my old son, and the door's always going to be open for you, but you're the one that's got to make the decision and do the correct thing and pull the shirt on and care again. The ball was dumped right in his court and give him little hope that Newcastle are falling over themselves to do a deal with Liverpool.
Well, I loved the tone of it because, you know, they didn't rise to the bait, and because they were calm and they were measured, I think Isak will probably feel a bit daft, really, because I do believe that he probably put that out hoping they would go one better than his statement and really blow this saga up to another level, but they didn't, and they didn't, because the reality is that the most likely outcome of this entire saga is that Alexander Isak remains a player of Newcastle United post September the 1st, and they know that they need him to be playing. Essentially, if he stops, there's no point in him stopping and not playing. So they can't go in hard and insulting on him. They need to keep that door ajar for his return. But the other thing with the statement, John, because Liverpool fans have said, why and how can you call £110 million bid, a British record fee, insulting? Surely you just accept it, you know? It's a lot of money. And one, it's not his true worth whatsoever. But most importantly, Newcastle in this whole saga need to be shown to be strong. They need to show that they're not pushovers, that they won't be walked over. And they also need to show that they won't be bullied by the so-called top teams who think they can just come in and cherry pick the best players. And that is what they're doing. They are sending a message out to Liverpool and to any other club who think, oh, well, Newcastle have done well. He's a star. We'll take him. And the second thing they're doing, John, and this is important as well, is they're showing potential arrivals, but also stars who are here now, the likes of your Toneys and your Joe Lintons, that if you want to move, we will listen to you. We will listen to your wishes. Eddie Howe has spoken about how careers are short. He understands that. In the statement with Isak, Newcastle said, we listen to the players. But if you want to move, there's a way to go about it. And they're making an example of Isak. His way is the wrong way. Come to us. Do it amicably. And we'll do what's best for you, but more importantly, what's best for Newcastle United. But there's got to be respect, two-way street. And I think making an example of Isak and sending that message to the players in the right way is also what they've done and what they have to do. If you want to leave, do it in the right way.
Absolutely. Because you've got to make certain that other players get that message within your own club and people that might want to come here. I mean, England internationals are currently doing it the right way. Eze has been absolutely brilliant, starring for Crystal Palace at the weekend when he knew he was going to be a £60 million transfer to either Spurs or Arsenal, as it's turned out. Gay, who could have sulked after his big £70 million move to Newcastle didn't happen, helped them win the FA Cup and the Community Shield as their skipper and is now talking about going to Liverpool. Neither of those England internationals went on strike. They have continued to play and continued to play well. They haven't just ambled about the field. They've put in top performances. They've done it the right way. They will be legends at Crystal Palace for the rest of their lives after they go to Liverpool or they go to Arsenal because they went in the right manner. And Isak could have done the same. It is not that Isak wants to go, it's the way he's gone about trying to force the hand that is very, very distasteful and shows an awful lot of disrespect, not least to his teammates who bonded so brilliantly at Aston Villa and were so full of caring for the club and for the badge at Aston Villa, yet were deprived of 2 points because he didn't play. If he'd been centre forward, we would have won. The centre forward with the right attitude, we would have won. And he's letting players down. He's letting his comrades down, as well as his manager, as well as his fans that adored him. He could have been a number 9 legend in the same way as Malcolm MacDonald and Alan Shearer and Jackie Milburn. But now he's got no chance. Absolutely no chance.
Yeah, totally tarnished his reputation. Obviously, with Newcastle United being quite clear that they don't want to sell unless certain conditions are met. And as we say, the likely outcome is that he remains a Newcastle United player. It probably does mean, John, that his value goes down. Next January, next summer, they will likely get less than the £110 million on the table from Liverpool. But going back to the point I made about showing you will not be bullied, sending out that strong message to potential buying clubs, you take that, and it seems Newcastle United are willing to accept that financial loss to send out that message. Are you happy with that?
I think they've got to make a stand. If we have been too reactive in the transfer market this summer, that's why we haven't got a forward in. That's why five times we've been in a 2-horse race for a centre forward and finished second. In my opinion, we've been too reactive instead of proactive. And we've got to be on the front foot with Isak. We've got to make a statement and make it clear to him and to the rest of the world that we will not be messed about. And if he's got to stay another year because the deal doesn't suit us because we haven't got replacements or the right money hasn't been put out, and we get less money in a year's time when he goes, because I think he'll eventually go. I think the biggest certainty is that at some stage Isak leaves. It's just when. But look at it this way. If he stays in the right frame of mind and his price goes down at the end of next season, but we might make million. His price might go down by 10 million or 20 million, but we could make that much by qualifying for the Champions League. instead of not qualifying for Champions League when we have Ursula and Gordon as our two centre-forward alternatives. So it swings in roundabouts. You can lose something here and gain something there. And it is a gamble. But the gamble you can't take is to cave in to Isak. That is a gamble you cannot take. You can't afford to take. Morally or financially, you can't afford to take that one. You can't afford to sell Isak next week to Liverpool without us having a centre forward and without them putting top dollar down. Can't afford to do it.
Because it sets a precedent, doesn't it? That's the message it sends out. You can,
Totally.
you can kick up a fuss and you get the move that you want, or if you're a big team and you stir the pot, then yeah, you can come and get our best players for less than the market value. So there's so much kind of going on in the background, so many messages that have been sent out from just kind of one response and one statement and one stance. But I think Newcastle United have handled it perfectly. Eddie Howe's handled it perfectly, and Alexander Isak has really thrown that last desperate dice to get that move to Anfield, and it's not worked whatsoever. I mean, I'm looking again at potential other names to throw into the hat that could come in, and we mentioned Wissa. We both think that one would happen. If I were Newcastle, I would look at a player called Promise David, who plays in the Belgian top flight. He's a Canadian international, 24 years of age. He's already scored 2 and 2 this season. He scored 24 and 41 last campaign. His numbers hold up to that of his fellow countryman Jonathan David when he played over there as well. Admittedly, he's just signed a new contract a few months ago, but I'm sure if Newcastle were able or willing to go to Union St Gilead and say, look, here's 35 million pounds, and they may well be tempted because money does speak. That's the player I would take a gamble on. He looks a real promising player, if you excuse the pun, with his name.
Yeah.
But I've said this a few times in recent weeks. I wonder if Newcastle United have missed the kind of boat, so to speak, by not shopping in those sort of markets, at least for maybe the Callum Wilson replacement. You know, you look at Villa have done it, Forest have done it in the last week as well, going to France for players who have cost 25-30 million pounds after a good couple of seasons. Do you think that market is good enough for where Newcastle United are currently and want to be in the next 2 years, or do you still think actually going after someone like Wissa and someone like Sesko, for example, was the right approach?
No, I mean, I think you've got to be clever. Brighton have been wonderfully clever at finding people that nobody'd ever heard of, and then all of a sudden they're getting sold for 100 million to Chelsea or whatever. You've got to go down that sort of road because, you know, when you look back, this, first and foremost, this is against you and I, the profession we are in. Newcastle do far too much business that's out in the public domain. There's too many leaks saying, oh, you know, we're looking at so-and-so, we're looking at it. It's never direct from the club, but it's allowed to seep out. And Newcastle's business is done in public. Now, Arsenal have been chasing Eze for yonks and have been doing the whole deal very quietly when pretending that they're not bothered about Isak. And they haven't just gazumped Spurs at the last minute because Havertz has got injured. There is a work has been done behind the scenes and has been kept quiet, and then all of a sudden they come out. Now Newcastle can look at players who are not necessarily superstars now, but they can turn into superstars. When they got Bruno out of France, he wasn't the world name that he is now. When they got Gordon out from Everton, of course we knew of him, but no, everybody wasn't clamouring. Everybody watched him, but nobody was clamouring. And then we got him and turned him into an England international. Toney we got relatively easy out of Italy. So we got Trippier from Atletico Madrid. We were able to get players who were slightly under the radar at that time, weren't wanted by the top clubs. Trippier because of age, and Bruno, who knows, he just wasn't discovered. Toney, etc. Why can't we do that again? We have gone high profile. We've gone in batting against other high profile clubs who have a greater recent history of us for winning trophies, and then we become at a disadvantage, and we lose players to other clubs. And it's such an awful way to go. We've redeemed ourselves a little bit in the transfer market with Elanga, with Chow, with Ramsey and Ramsdale. I mean, we have had a good summer outside of the obvious, which is getting two strikers. Yet our season will be determined in the next couple of weeks by what the centre forward situation is on September the 1st. That will determine whether we have a good season or not. But we've actually, having had a very slow start to the transfer market, we've actually had a good transfer market. We have got every position we want filling: goalkeeper, right side, centre half, midfield, right winger. We've filled, bar the most important one of the lot at the top of the pitch we haven't. And so we'll stand or fall by that. But otherwise, we've done okay. But we've got to stop doing deals in public. We've got to stop just looking at the hugest possible and think, how did we get Bruno? And how did we get, even in this country when we got Livramento and Hall and Gordon, we weren't batting for the greatest names in the cup. We weren't trying to get Mo Salah or somebody like that and then failing. Let's be a bit cuter in our transfer targets. Get people that we're able to get and might want to come. I mean, we were the first to go for Icky Tiki Taki, Hugo that's gone to Liverpool. We were the first to go for him. We discovered him about 2 years ago before he went to Paris Saint-Germain. But we faffed about for so long that he's taken at the end. We faffed about with James Trafford for so long that he went back to Man City. I mean, stop doing it all in public, do it in private, and let's get proactive, not reactive, and get deals done quick instead of hanging about. We're hung about for Gay. How long? Keep putting it up by 5 mil. Didn't get him in the end. We've got Chow. We might have got a better guy. But it's not the way to conclude deals.
Yeah, the window, I think, has actually been quite decent. I mean, if Isak wasn't kicking up a fuss, we would be just one striker away from, I think, the perfect window. But as it is, there is that saga playing on in the background. But yes, sometimes you maybe want Newcastle United to be that bit more clinical. But I guess it's a difficult balance, isn't it, from watching the pennies? Because as much as Newcastle are in a better financial position this summer than they've been in the last 3, they've still got to watch the pennies. And it's about trying to get the best value for money. But I think at certain times in a window, and we're probably at that stage now, as you've already mentioned, you're going to have to maybe pay more than you want because time is running out and there is an act of desperation. And Newcastle United don't want to go down that route. They don't want to buy for buying's sake. But again, it's that balance. Okay, you're not buying Wissa for buying's sake. You want him, but you might have to pay more than the 40 million you want to get him, which is better than spending £50 million on a player that you don't really want, but you have brought in because you need to fill the position.
And of course, if we bid good money for a number one striker and say 5 million over the top for Wissa, we then sell Isak and we don't have to worry about the pennies if we get 130 million for Isak, do we? That situation changes the whole transfer pot, doesn't it?
Certainly does. Another name that we haven't mentioned, Ivan Toney, and I think it's even more important to maybe throw him into the mix. He had a brilliant season in his first campaign in Saudi Arabia at Al Hilal, and they are 75% owned by the Public Investment Fund. And we know what would happen, John, should a loan deal be done between 2 clubs that have the majority ownership of the PIF. However, Blueco, who we know have strong links to Chelsea, have signed Enciso from Brighton. And he will go to Strasbourg initially, but is seen as a long-term Chelsea player. Not broken any rules, but doesn't exactly sit comfortably with me. And it probably does raise a couple of questions from certain Newcastle fans to say, well, actually, we're there. why don't Newcastle and the PIF and the several clubs that they own in Saudi Arabia do exactly the same? Why not? Why don't the PIF sign Yoane Wissa, for example, and say he's going to spend 2 years at Newcastle and spend another 2 years at a Saudi club?
There's all ifs or buts, and it's one of those things you've got to take advantage of the rules, whichever way they are. And that's what I'm saying about Wissa. If you say you don't, I mean, I don't like the way Wissa's gone about his business. How can I like the way he's gone about the business when I don't like the way Isak has, and it's exactly the same? I don't like it. But if it happens and we lose Isak long term to Liverpool, whether it's in the next couple of weeks or January or whatever, then we may as well take Wissa in exactly the same way as we lost this guy. If you're within the rules, you've got to exploit the rules to the maximum advantage for your own club. That is what you do. That's what you do when you're director of football. Oh, I forgot we haven't got one. But that's what you're there to do. We've got to play by the rules, but take advantage of the rules as well. Because believe you me, our rivals are doing that.
Just finally then, John, to sign off, if you were sitting across the table from Alexander Isak, giving his statement, giving Newcastle's response, giving the standoff, what would you say to him?
Well, if we were in the same room together, first thing I would say, Alexander, would you like to stand up? Now, would you like to look round this room? Have you noticed that every window's closed and the door's closed? You've boxed yourself in. You need to open the windows, let fresh air in, open the doors, see the rest of the world. You have put yourself in jail. You and your agent cannot be right and everybody else be wrong. Have you noted not just Newcastle United, but all your ex-footballers, all your peers that you should respect and think what a wonderful career they've had, from Wayne Rooney to Alan Shearer to Paul Merson to who, they've all come out and said, I'm sorry you've gone about this the wrong way. Are they all wrong and you and your agent are right? Or is it the other way on? What you have done to yourself, never mind disrespecting your teammates and the best guy that's come into your life, which is Eddie Howe, your talent's taken you to where you are, but he's helped it to blossom. And so is the teammates that's been around you. And now you're deserting them, not by going to Liverpool, by being on strike now and not playing now like Eze and everybody else does. Now, I want you, Isak, to take your mind back just a few months to Wembley. Only back in March there to Wembley. And Newcastle beat Liverpool to win their first domestic trophy in 70 years, and there was 2 goal scorers. Now, the first goal scorer was Dan Burn, a Geordie lad who initially was looked upon as being so slow that he needed tugs to turn him round to give chase. But because of his dedication and his love, he's gone on to be an England international. He scored a wonderful goal at Wembley. He's a local hero, loved by the fans. The other goal scorer was you, who immediately decided that you wanted to desert a ship that was sailing out of port proudly for the first time so that you could join the beaten finalists. What a difference in attitude from Dan Burn to Alexander Isak, our 2 scorers at Wembley. Dan Burn will be loved for the rest of his life by Newcastle fans. You have made certain Newcastle fans will not love you anymore. Has it been worth it? You could have still got to Liverpool without doing that. Now, it's not too late to start repairing your tattered reputation. It is almost too late, but it's not too late. If you go and look in the English dictionary, the hardest word in there is a 4-letter word. And I want you to go and look it up. And the word is sorry. And September the 2nd, you might have no option but to say that to Eddie Howe, to the owners, go into the dressing room and say it to the rest of your teammates and say it to the fans on the terraces who have adored you and chanted your name and have a war flags display for you. You owe them that. Have you done the right thing? No, you haven't. Do you realize you haven't? Well, you ought to. Please look at your life before it's too late. Look at what Eze did, what Gary did. Look at how Supermac left, how Les Ferdinand left, how Peter Beardsley left, and still stayed heroes. You've given it all away. Why? Why? And can you admit with hindsight that you've got it wrong?
Well, there we go. We will certainly find out whether Alexander Isak can find sorry in the dictionary and rediscover that love for Newcastle United, and whether the fans as well can forgive and forget. This one's got a little bit to run yet. It's going to be an interesting end to this summer transfer window. Cheers to John for popping back onto the podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back on Saturday actually with the match preview. We'll have the view from the opposition on Friday from one of our colleagues down in Liverpool, so do watch out for those 2 episodes.